Every neighborhood has a heartbeat, a place that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core. In Boston's historic North End, that place is Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. Boston Barber and Tattoo Company has become home to A-list Boston celebrities like Gordon Hayward, Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Baines. Boston Barber and Tattoo is more than just Boston's most well-known corner barbershop. It's also a tourist attraction for the hundreds and thousands of people that visit the North End throughout the year. Boston Barber and Tattoo, a North End landmark that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core, located at 113 Salem Street.
Welcome to another edition of the Good and Plenty podcast. I am your host, Jeff Goodman, and it is Tuesday, which means we've got a great NBA show for you. And we've got a guy who does a little bit of everything. Frank Isola, New Yorker, Athletic, ESPN, Sirius. He'll join us today. He's our guest. Remember, please subscribe. iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media. You can find me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter. You can also find me at WatchStadium.com. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. Go to plenty.robinhood.com and get a free stock when you sign up. Now pleased to welcome on a guy who wears many hats. I can't even keep track of how many hats you wear, Frank Isola. Athletic, ESPN, Sirius. It sounds like a lot of work. I don't think it's really a lot of work, but you tell me I'm wrong.
Let me tell you something, and thanks for having me on. The last thing people want to hear about is how hard any of us work. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of different things, which also makes it enjoyable.
Yeah, no doubt. You landed on your feet quickly after the Daily News debacle, and I like the fact that you're doing the athletic stuff now, and love you on ESPN. What's your favorite thing to do? What is if? And I'm putting you on the spot here. I don't mean to like pick one over the other, but like for me, I hated doing sideline. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, because well, that's like a different kind of thing. To me, they're all different.
Yeah.
The radio gives you more freedom because it's 3 hours, and you have to fill 3 hours with talking. But of course, I do the show with Brian Scalabrine, so that basically reduces it to about 15 minutes of talking that I do because he never shuts up. The TV part of it is fun. That probably gets you more recognition, and the writing part of it, especially when I worked for a newspaper, there's always something to be said when you feel like you had written a pretty good story. There was something about seeing your name in print. So, they're all different. To me, I think having the writing background is good because it kind of teaches you, how to formulate a story and, what a story is. And I think that's always helped. I think when you look at, this, like look in the business. Even if if you're talking about guys like Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon, if you're talking about somebody like Larry Merchant from HBO from a million years ago, and even guys like Stephen A. Smith and Adam Schefter, whether it's Buster Olney, Adrian Wojnarowski, like everyone has that kind of writing background, which I think is certainly a good base to have.
Yeah, I get the most satisfaction out of writing a good story because I think you put in the most work doing it, right? Like when we get up and TV, whatever it is, you kind of spout off. You prepare, but it's not the same, I think, level of investment as writing a story from start to finish when you're putting in a ton of work, interviewing a ton of people, or even breaking a story, right? You're breaking a story, you get that rush that you don't get from just going on TV.
100%. And that's the one thing about being a reporter, especially when you're covering a team. I covered the Mets for 2 years. I did the Knicks for a really long time. And when you're kind of embedded with a team and the season, kind of writes itself. It's, this journey, it becomes like a soap opera, especially in New York. So things are constantly changing and you're building relationships with people. But how it is too. When you're covering people, sometimes you have to be critical of them. So I think it also teaches you, it's kind of easy sometimes to just sit back and take cheap shots at people. But when you're the guy that has to cover them, you have to see them every day. I think when you criticize them, you're certainly coming from a place where you're trying to be respectful, and I think you have a lot more credibility because you're the guy that has to face them all the time. And I think that's what I've tried to do. I think when people deserve the criticism, you criticize them, they deserve praise. You praise absolutely, and I think also, and you probably realize this too when you get older. After a while, like as long as you feel like what you had written or said was fair, like you could live with somebody being mad. I had somebody tell me a long time ago, Joe Sexton, who worked for the New York Times, he now runs ProPublica, that website. He told me many years ago, if you're covering people and you don't have somebody mad at you, you're probably not doing a good job. And I think that's probably true.
1,000% right. And now, again, you don't want to say things just to say them. But if you're doing your due diligence, you do all your homework, you're talking to enough people, I feel like I can sleep well at night because I feel like at least I'm not – so many people these days, Frank, I think are selling out for the information. And I feel like I'll never do that. I just won't. I won't sell out for the information. Like, again, if I'm doing a hot seat and there's coaches that I'm close with or that I've got good relationships with, I don't care. Listen, you're going on the hot seat just because if you belong on there, you belong on there. Or if you're cheating your ass off in college basketball and I got to investigate you, well, listen, don't cheat your ass off or I'm not investigating you.
Yeah, and I think that's, when you're covering college basketball, that's always going to be the thing because the coaches are the most powerful. They're the guys that are always going to be around. And then in the NBA, the players are powerful. Now, not all of them are going to last 10 years, 15 years. But I think the one thing that the NBA players have done is kind of realized and understood the power that they have. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to LeBron James. I think Chris Paul is in that category as well. And I think there definitely is kind of this trade-off now with a lot of people in the media where everyone wants access so badly that sometimes they hold back. And once again, I also think, like I said, it's not like if you're writing and you're just taking cheap shots at people, I get it why players would be upset. But I think, say, for example, with a guy like LeBron, I think with him, I think he's thinking, you know what, if you're going to be critical of me, I'm probably not going to deal with you.
I don't need to.
I was listening. Right. Exactly. And I was listening to Stephen A. Smith the other day, said something on TV where they were talking about Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard and LeBron and who Kawhi would be better with, Kevin Durant or LeBron. And before Steve gave his answer, he kind of said, I just want to put this out there because I know LeBron's people get mad at me all the time because it's not enough that I say that he's the greatest player. Anytime that I'm a little critical of him, they get upset. And I think I kind of laughed at that because I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think LeBron has become so powerful. That's not to say that people don't criticize him and everybody that writes about him is in his back pocket. I'm not saying that. But I do think that's kind of out there a little bit. Look, when he said that thing a couple of weeks ago when he went back to Cleveland for the first time, and he said that Kyrie was responsible for breaking apart the Cavaliers. Well, that's not entirely true. Yes, he was the first one to get traded, but that's because you guys were trying to trade him, number one, and when they asked you if you were going to commit beyond this year, beyond one more season, LeBron wouldn't do that. So Kyrie was like, listen, he's probably not going to be here, so why don't you trade me and try to get something for me? But it's like LeBron's very good at kind of shaping the narrative, so to speak, and I think a lot of people getting back to your point, I think there's a lot of people in the business how there's a chase for access and this, race to stay close to people that I think sometimes it clouds your objectivity.
All right, so we'll move on to actual basketball. I think we'll bore too many people if we talk about access and our jobs. Knicks,
You're right.
Knicks or Nets? Who becomes relevant first?
Who becomes better first?
Relevant. Neither one's relevant. Let's be honest. Neither one's been relevant.
But in New York, the Knicks always seem to be because it is the Knicks. And even when the Knicks are terrible, people seem to have some interest in them. Now, I think for the Knicks, what will help them is that they'll be in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. Yeah. So this summer, it seems like Kevin Durant is either going to resign with Golden State, maybe go to the Clippers, and I think the Knicks, unless there's this other mystery team out there, so it looks like the Knicks are going to be in the running for Kevin Durant. So I would say the Knicks based on that, even though the Nets can do some things. And right now the Nets have been a better team. And they could actually make the playoffs this year. The Knicks are not going to be a playoff team.
When's Porzingis going to come back, by the way? Any idea? Any feel for, does he come back at all this year?
I wonder if they'll have him come back late just to say that he came back, and that could kind of help them a little bit in free agency with Kevin Durant. If you remember when Paul George got hurt in August of that year with USA Basketball, he ended up coming back. I thought it was either very late March or early April, even though
it was April because I was in Indy
Yeah.
for the Final Four and I covered his return. It was like the night before. It was like a couple days before the Final Four.
Yeah, he struggled, which you expect. I mean, he had been out for all that time, but it was probably good that he came back, even for him psychologically. And then think about what Paul George is this season. He's been tremendous. So I would think for Porzingis, as long as he's healthy, you don't want to come back if you're not ready. But I would think at some point, I mean, come on. Usually they say that injury takes a full year. So early February would be a full year, about like a week after the Super Bowl. Late March, early April for him. And I understand the Knicks are not going to be a playoff team, but would there be something wrong about getting him in there, playing him maybe 15 minutes a night? Obviously never playing him on the back-to-back, but just kind of getting him out there. There were some people that thought he would be back by Christmas. That would be a Christmas miracle. I don't think that's going to happen. But I still think late March, early April that you'll see Porzingis.
It's been really quiet, hasn't it?
With him, absolutely. Absolutely. And think about it, too. He went from last year making the All-Star team for the first time, and he was really excited about that. And then he had the knee injury, and then, of course, he was unavailable to play in the All-Star game. And, there was a time last year when the Knicks beat the Boston Celtics. It's almost a year ago to the day. It was on, I believe it was December 21st. The Knicks played a really good game against Boston. You might remember it. It was at the Garden. Michael Beasley had the huge game off the bench.
Yes.
The Knicks were 17-14 after that game. They actually were, doing a little something. Then on Christmas Day, they lost to the Sixers and they started going south a little bit. But last year, they were actually competitive into January. This year, not so much. They've really kind of fallen off the map.
I'd love to see Kevin Durant go to New York. I think it would be great for the Knicks. I don't know how KD would be able to handle the New York media. Honestly, I've known him for a long time, and I've talked about it on the podcast a little bit. I think he's changed because he was always a guy that everybody loved and nobody ever said a bad word about. And then when he went to Golden State, he wasn't expecting this type of backlash. He's gotten it from like half the country hates him. The other half still likes him. And I think, it's hard not to respect him. I mean, I like Kevin Durant. I always said I think it was a good decision for him and one that he did because he understood it's going to be more fun to play in Golden State with these guys who move the basketball rather than with Russell Westbrook, who dribbles. They both did. And they both, get contested poor shots at the end of the shot clock. But I think he just wasn't prepared for the backlash that he got going to Golden State. And I think if he goes to New York and he's the guy and he doesn't win, I just don't know how he'll be able to handle that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But, first of all, going back to him going to Golden State, people remember how Moses Malone ended up in Philadelphia or how, certain players ended up with the Celtics. I think 10, 20, 30 years from now, it's not going to matter. And if he stays in Golden State and they say they win 2 more championships, it's going to be remembered that Kevin Durant was on one of the greatest teams of all time. And that's really all that's going to matter. And he went there for a reason. He went there. He wanted to be with better players and win. Well, he got exactly what he wanted. He's been on a better team. He's won, and he's been the Finals MVP in back-to-back years. And I agree with you. I think what he has struggled with in a sports sense, he's looked at as a sports villain because he left small market Oklahoma City, and they had a good team, and they almost beat Golden State the year that Golden State won the 73 games. And it was the old, I can't beat them, so join them. And that turns a lot of people off because people think about sports as, you want to go out there, you want to try to beat the best as opposed to joining the best. Now, if he were to come to New York and he were to win, then it'll be, well, hey, he went to Golden State, won minimum 2 titles, came to New York and won. People might look at him on a different level, but I also think there is a risk because, I don't know how he'll handle everything here in New York. Can the Knicks get good enough? You would be under a bit of a time frame. He is 30, he's 30 years old. Not to say that he's done anytime soon, but, a player with that kind of body, he has had foot injuries or issues and ankle injuries before. You don't know how that could work out. And here would be the thing that would concern me if I were Kevin Durant. If you look really over the last 20 years, the legacies of players, coaches, and executives, was it better in New York than it was before they came to New York or after they left New York? And I'll give you a couple of examples. Phil Jackson, Larry Brown, Isaiah Thomas. All right, those are executives and coaches. But look at players. Amari Stoudemire, did it really help him that much? Stephon Marbury, wasn't he better before he came to New York? So there's been like a lot of guys that have come to New York where it really hasn't been their best moment. Even guys like Tyson Chandler, who had a pretty good run in New York, he also won a championship in Dallas. J.R. Smith had a pretty good run in New York, but he won a championship in Cleveland. There's and then you could go down the list of guys that came here for a minute: Baron Davis, Penny Hardaway, Tracy McGrady.
It is amazing.
All these guys.
Jeez, all the names you're rattling off, like who's been better in New York? Like find me some good sales tools.
Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah.
Jeff Hornacek. I mean, it hasn't been easy for a lot. I mean, first of all, guys like Larry Brown, Phil Jackson, and Isaiah Thomas, and Lenny Wilkins, those are Hall of Famers I'm talking about. I mean, think about the way you view Phil Jackson today as opposed to before
totally.
He took him.
Yes. Now I view him as a lazy executive who didn't want to get out of his house and do any work.
That's right. Right. And lost a lot.
Lost a lot, no doubt. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. It's never a bad time to start thinking about your investment portfolio. Whether you're looking to buy or sell stocks, crypto, ETFs, make sure you sign up for Robinhood. And I know markets can be complicated, but Robinhood makes everything easy for you. It's going to build you your own customized feed right when you sign up. They sort certain stocks for you in different collections, like 100 most popular, social media, or pharmaceutical. And you'll learn more about it as you go along. Get started today. Sign up is extremely easy. All it takes is 4 taps on your phone to start trading. Best part is, Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees. You keep all your profits. Robinhood has given listeners a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build your portfolio. Sign up at plenty.robinhood.com. That's plenty.robinhood.com. So, hey, what's your take of this whole this trade that was, that wasn't, that was again of Trevor Ariza as the centerpiece of this deal that took Ariza back to Washington? And I just find it comical that in a 3-team trade like this, where you've got Memphis, Phoenix, and Washington, and the key players are Chris Wallace, James Jones, and Ernie Grenfell, that they don't all talk to each other at some point throughout the trade. That you're only talking to one other and relying on that other. Like, how are you not having a 3-way call at some point?
Yeah, I don't understand that part of it. Maybe somebody wanted to back out of it, and that was the reason that they gave for backing out. Is Chris Wallace, the general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies, is he going to come out and be that defiant about, saying that somebody else leaked it and we had nothing to do with it, and there was no way that it was going to be Dylan Brooks, and he basically admitted that it was Marshawn Brooks. I don't know if it was Memphis, and James Jones is just starting out at this, and who knows, maybe Robert Sarver got involved on some level, the owner of the Phoenix Suns. I mean, Ernie Grenfell's been around forever, and he's made a ton of trades. So one of those teams must have wanted to back out of it, and that was the excuse they used. It was pretty embarrassing. At least the trade, in some form, got made. Phoenix got what they wanted. They got Kelly Oubre, Austin Rivers, and Washington got Trevor Ariza. So basically, the principles of the deal ended up going to the teams that they were supposed to go to.
Yeah, I still don't believe Chris Wallace, just because he always says he didn't draft Hashim Thabit and he didn't want to draft Joe Forte. It was Red Auerbach. So I just I don't know. There's something about Chris Wallace that just buy it. Whatever it is, don't try to deflect it. Don't try to say it wasn't your pick, wasn't your fault, whatever. Like, I don't know. I just feel like, again, you've been doing this a long time, and so has Grunfeld. So 2 of the 3 players in this deal have been making trades for a long, long time.
But like I said, I think one of those teams wanted to back out, and that was the excuse that they used.
I guess. I mean, Dylan Brooks or Marshawn Brooks. I get there's a significant gap between the two, but listen, Washington got what they wanted out of at the end of the day from this one, and I think they're the one who improves the most in an opportunity to make, the Wizards should be a lock playoff team, with or without Ariza, but certainly with Ariza, and John Wall looks like John Wall again finally.
Yeah, he played I was at the game against Boston on that Wednesday night where he played really well. He played really well against the Lakers on Sunday. So, he's capable of doing that. They should be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. So they got a player that's a professional, plays both ends of the court. He can shoot three-pointers unless it's Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals next year, where poor Trevor Ariza couldn't make a shot, but then again, it was contagious. Nobody out there can make a shot. And, Phoenix had to do something. And think about the week that Robert Sarver had. The story comes out about him wanting the city to, the taxpayers, to pony up $150 million to refurbish the arena. Here's a guy whose team hasn't made the playoffs for 8 straight years. Then he has that woman get up at the city council meeting.
She was awesome.
That older woman, elderly woman, I should say, and she crushed him. So he had a crazy week. Then the trade initially fell apart, and they were able to do it over again. He had some interesting week, that's for sure.
Yeah, that was your girl, Greta. I think Greta was her name.
Greta Rogers.
Right?
Rogers. She said Robert Sarver is so tight he squeaks when he walks. Man.
That was tremendous. And it came out of nowhere. Like, she was talking for like 30 seconds, and you're like, all right, it's getting a little boring. I'm gonna turn off the channel. And then when she said that, I just lost it. Absolutely lost it.
Do you know they haven't made the playoffs now for 8 straight years? And you go back to when they were good. Joe Johnson was going to be a free agent. They could have signed him. They could have locked him up for, I think it was like $48 million. And Robert Sarver didn't want to pay it. So Joe Johnson went into free agency, ended up getting that $100 million from Atlanta. But if they'd kept Joe Johnson, especially at that number with the team that they had, that's the thing about, if I'm a fan of the Phoenix Suns, I'm thinking, all right, you're the owner. You want us to help you renovate this arena. Yet when you had a roster and we were on the cusp of maybe being a championship team, then you started, being a penny pincher, and you didn't want to pay the freight. And I think that's like, if I'm a fan of the Phoenix Suns, I live in Phoenix, I'm thinking, now you want me to help you out with your arena? No, it doesn't work that way.
So if you are the Phoenix Suns, if you had to do it all over again, and you had the number 1 pick, DeAndre Ayton or Luka Doncic, who would you take?
It seems like Doncic, right? Because he's more suitable for today's NBA. That's the one thing about the big man in today's NBA. It's, unless the guy, could play on the perimeter a little bit, I'm not so sure that those guys work. It's too early to close the book on DeAndre Ayton and Trae Young, but Luka Doncic, everyone, raves about him. He's big too. He's big and strong. It looks like he's only going to get better, but that's especially since the coach Igor Kukuskov coached Luka Doncic. Right. That part of it makes no sense.
Baffling. And we all thought they were going to take him when they hired him, right? I mean, it looked like a no-brainer. Ryan McDonough hires him as a coach, and he's coached Luka, and it's like, okay, now they're going to take him number 1. And I'm not sure either. I say, let's give it some time. But to me, it's either Ayton or Luka at the number 1 pick. I don't think you go wrong with either one of them. I think Ayton's more skilled than people realize, and he'll be a guy that can average 18 and 10 for his NBA career and be maybe an all-star, maybe even a perennial all-star. I don't know. All right, so a guy who people thought was going to be an all-star, Markelle Fultz. What do you do? If you're Elton Brand right now in Philly, what do you do? Do you cut your losses and just say, like, we're going to do a deal and maybe toss him in a deal and just see what we can get? Or do you try to see what happens with him through this whole process? Maybe you can get him back to where he is a piece. I don't even know listen, I saw Fultz a ton in AAU and in college. And I'm not going to say like I thought he was going to be an NBA superstar, but I thought he would be an NBA starter for 10 years and a good scorer who could average 15 a game. Well,
the thing about that injury that he has, like, is that genetics or is that something where he injured himself in some undisclosed way? So I don't know, like, how, like, you come back from that injury, and could this be something that impacts him long term? I would have to think that if they could trade him, you almost have to cut your losses here. And what makes it a lot easier too? Elton Brand wasn't the guy that drafted him.
Right.
So even though, just like waving goodbye to a number 1 overall pick is not easy to do, it's not like it's kind of going on your resume. You have to do what's best for the team. And when they started the season out, and they started both Fultz and Ben Simmons, I remember saying, like, on the first night, I was like, this is never going to work. The one guy can't shoot threes, and the other guy won't shoot threes. How can you have a backcourt like that in today's NBA where you're getting no three-point shots out of them? So that made absolutely no sense.
Fultz could shoot it, though, Frank. Fultz could shoot it some.
Yeah,
he wasn't great.
When Well, when is he going to do that? He hasn't done the NBA
Well,
yet. That's for
no,
sure.
but again, something happened. Listen, I don't know if it was physical or mental, but this kid could shoot the three before. Now it doesn't look anything like what it was in AAU ball. Like he could shoot the three. Like that's the baffling part of it is it the yips? Is it something mental block right now, or is it a legitimate injury that maybe caused this mental block? We don't know.
To me, it might be all three.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
he's a different dude. By the way, he's a different kid.
He's shooting 28.6% this year on threes, and for his career, he's 26.7. So before you go around saying that he can shoot, he hasn't proven it in the NBA.
He could. I'm not saying he can now. I'm saying at one point in time, I think he shot 40% at Washington in a brief abbreviated college season. I think he shot close to 40% from three. All I'm saying is he could. It didn't look like it does now, right? I mean, it's like now it's a hitch.
And to be fair to him, he's only taken 15.
Yeah,
he's 4 of 15 for his career.
It's 15 more than I thought he'd take this year.
And by the way, going as of right this moment, what's the date? It's Monday, December, whatever it is. How many three-pointers do you think Ben Simmons has attempted this year?
Either 0 or 1. I mean, maybe there's a desperation one.
0.
0. Like, I don't understand
0 3-point attempts.
I don't get Ben Simmons not saying, like, on one hand, it's really impressive, right? Because everybody says, and he hears it all the time, you can't shoot, you can't shoot, you can't shoot. And most kids would be like, I'm going to show them. Screw this. I'm going to show them I can shoot. Think of how disciplined you have to be, how mature on one hand, not to shoot a three, just to show all these skeptics and critics that you can do it. On the other hand, I would say, like, dude, you got to shoot the three in the game. Like, at some point, you got to let it fly. And even if you go 0 for 5 in a game or 0 for 3 every game for 2 weeks, we don't care. Like, how has Brett Brown not said that to Ben Simmons and said, hey, Ben, tonight you're going to take 3 threes. I don't give a shit. If you miss them all, I don't give a shit. If you airball all 3, you're going to take 3 threes tonight, period.
Last year, he took 11, didn't make one. This year, he hasn't attempted one. He's played over 110 NBA games, and he has yet to make a three-point shot. That's almost hard to believe when you think about it. But like you said, there is something to be said for a guy that understands what his strengths and weaknesses are, and he plays to his strengths. Now, can you win big without your ball-dominant guard not shooting threes? It's hard to believe. Now, them changing their lineup, J.J. Redick starting, trading for Jimmy Butler helps because now you have three-point shooting out there. So that part, I like their team a lot better today than I did at the start of the season. But you would have to think that Ben Simmons, he's only 22 years old, that eventually he has to develop some type of three-point shot. I mean, look at Jason Kidd when he first came into the league.
Right.
You know, he wasn't a big-time shooter, and he developed into a guy that could be a reliable three-point shooter.
Yeah, I think he shot 40 from 3 at one point, didn't he?
Yeah.
Jason Kidd was like a good shooter at a certain point in his NBA career. Like you said, maybe Ben Simmons will be. I don't think they can win at all, until Ben Simmons is an actual threat from the perimeter. Because it's not like Jimmy Butler's some great three-point shooter. It's not like Joel Embiid is some great three-point shooter. J.J. Redick isn't getting any younger. How many more years you're going to have with J.J. Redick at this level?
Yeah, and that's why I thought maybe they would go out and try to – I'm sure they did try to get Kyle Korver. I'm sure that, once the, around the trading deadline or maybe guys getting released like J.R. Smith would actually make some sense too for Philadelphia. So I don't think Philadelphia's done yet in terms of having a roster. You remember last year they made a couple of big pickups, guys that got released after the trading deadline, which was Bellinelli and Ilyasova, and they really helped them during the playoffs. They need one of those types of players.
The Rockets. Have you given up on them this year? You think they have a shot of being relevant? I mean, I want them just to get in the 8th spot, just so we have a great first round matchup. That's all.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad way. I still think they'll be able to recover as long as everybody stays healthy. A big part of their early season slump was Harden was hurt, Chris Paul was suspended for a couple of games, and then Harden was hurt again, and Chris Paul's been hurt. So that has something to do with it. I'd like to think that they can be a playoff team, but maybe their window. Now, they are hovering around 500, but maybe last year was their window. They won 6 games. They had a 3-2 lead on Golden State. There were some years where everything seems to be clicking, and last year it was for the Houston Rockets until that Game 5 and Chris Paul got hurt. And they had the hamstring injury. You never heard from him again, and they lost the last 2 games. And by the way, they had double-digit leads in both of those games. In both games 6 on the road, Game 7 back in Houston, they had double-digit leads, and they blew those leads and lost the series. And maybe that's going to be it. Maybe that's the closest that group, meaning really Chris Paul and James Harden, is ever going to get again to being in the NBA Finals. Chris
Paul does not look like the same player this year. He really doesn't. Defensively, offensively, he doesn't look like an elite player. Certainly like he did last year and most of his career. I don't know if the injury has affected him now or just age, and I don't know. But again, I was always concerned when they put Chris Paul with Harden and obviously, then you threw Melo in the mix. I was like, I just don't know if all this works together, even with just Harden and Chris Paul. And I think a lot of it is you're winning, right? You're winning. And it continues that way, and you're feeling good about yourselves. Everything's working out well. You don't go through a ton of adversity last year. I mean, everything was – and there's kind of an intimidation factor too. When they take the court, everybody just thought they were going to outscore you, and they were good defensively. And this year, when it doesn't get off to a good start, everybody realizes, okay, you know what? Maybe they're not as good as we thought. Why are we intimidated by this team? Yeah, they got 2 Hall of Famers, but what else do they have?
And, if you look at, everybody talks about what John Wall's going to be making over the next few years. Look at Chris Paul's contract. He has got a ton of money coming to him. So that was the thing with the Clippers. The Clippers were like saying, all right, so maybe in the short term we'll be hurt by this, but in the long term we'll be better off. And I think that's why the Clippers are in play for Kawhi, Kevin Durant, maybe both of them, because of the salary cap space that they have. And, and that's why this window that we talk about all the time for the Houston Rockets, it's certainly starting to close.
All right, so I'm going to leave you on this one. We're going to circle back to our careers a little bit, and I don't know if you're going to go there. You may just try to bail out of this question, but can you give me your favorite Mike Lupica story? And I ask this only because years ago I was at the Final Four, and he was bitching and complaining about the seat that he got at the Final Four. He was up top, and he hadn't covered a college basketball game all year, and he was trying to kick somebody else out who had been to 50 games that year. So I'm sure you have a lot of good Lupica stories. I don't know if you want to or will go there, but can you give me one entertaining one?
I have no problem. I always got along really well with Mike. He was always very good to me, and I got to do the sports reporters with him, and it was a lot of fun. He was good at it, but being with him, it felt like you were on a TV show about a TV show. What do you mean? He was kind of in the host chair. It was just like he was. He would get upset about certain things, which he had every right to. It was just funny. I always get a kick out of him. He always kind of makes me laugh. And I worked with him for a really long time. And I'll say this about Mike: if something were to happen and you did a column on it, that dude could churn out copy.
He works.
He could, and a lot of these newspaper guys, whether it's Bob Ryan or Mike, they've been doing it for a million years. And I spoke to Bill Plafsky earlier. The longtime LA Times columnist. He was at that Rams Eagles Sunday night game. These old school columnists, man, they're different. They're they like going to events and still writing. And there's still something to be said about the good newspaper column off of a game. And reading Bill Plashke's column off of the Rams game where, he's basically calling out Jared Goff. It was interesting. But my stories about Mike are pretty boring for the most part. I did get to go to his house once. No, I got one for you.
Go ahead. What do you got?
The Knicks were pursuing Larry Brown. So Mike, working all these jobs, got a nice little house out there in Bridgehampton. He's got a good thing going.
Yeah.
So I went out there, and I was doing the story on Larry Brown, but it was getting late. So Mike said, I'd just write from my house. So Mike actually ran out to the store for me and got me something to eat. Which was pretty nice. And his kids were watching the Red Sox game, and I started chanting, "Let's go Yankees!" And his kids got mad at me because they're Red Sox fans. So they had a lot of fun hanging out at his place. But he ran out and got me food. That was like
Did you
that was
tip
pretty
him?
good street cred. I felt like for me. He was like my errand boy. I said, "Yeah, go get me something if you don't mind." It was pretty cool.
You didn't tip him? Nothing?
Nothing. No.
Nothing.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy guy. Between I think you told me your day today was pretty insane, wasn't it? Wasn't it a little bit of TV, a little bit of radio, a little bit of writing? I know nobody wants to hear you complaining, but you earned your money today.
The triple crown. The triple crown.
And you did a podcast. You killed it in a podcast. So.
There you go.
I appreciate it. Frank Isola of combination of The Athletic, ESPN, and Sirius. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
All right, take care. Thanks again for joining us. Another edition of Good and Plenty is in the books. Remember, every Tuesday, NBA edition, every Thursday, College Hoops edition of Good and Plenty. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can follow me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter. You can also follow me at WatchStadium.com. And thanks again to our guest this week, Frank Isola of multiple platforms, The Athletic, ESPN, and Sirius. Thanks to my producer, Evan Valenti. And we will see you Thursday for another edition of Good and Plenty.